We're going to get the program started here so we can keep on schedule. So if you'd all take a seat, and I'm going to kick things off. Thank you for being here this morning. We're very happy to see such a full room, and so we thank you for your attendance today. My name is David Burks. I have the pleasure of currently serving as the chairman of the NCLA board. I'm a longtime Colorado and fifth-generation Coloradoan. Moved up to northern Colorado in 1982 to attend CSU, and I've stayed. I've been in the technology field with Hewlett-Packard and Seagate, and now I'm a small business owner of Sweetheart Winery. So all of these issues about, really creating a better climate for businesses is what the core, mission of the NCLA is, near and dear to my heart, and I hope it is to you too. So, again, welcome. The summit is a production of the Northern Colorado Legislative Alliance, but also the Fort Collins Area Chamber of Commerce, the Greeley Area of Chamber of Commerce, and the Loveland Chamber of Commerce, along with upstate Colorado. Today's event is only really made possible by our sponsors, so we really want to thank the sponsors who have anteed up here. We'd like to start with Elevations Credit Union, who is our gold sponsor today, so thank you. Our silver sponsors, BizWest, ENT Credit Union, UC Health. Our bronze sponsors, Woodward, iHeartMedia. And thank you to our event sponsors, which include Canvas Credit Union, Jet Marketing, North 40 News, Northern Engineering, Office Spaces, and Sinorama. So thank you all very much for those. And so without further ado, I'd like to get our first panel started. I'm going to introduce Jaime Henning, who's the CEO of the Greeley Area Chamber of Commerce and our water board. Thanks, Jaime.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to echo David's comments. We're so thrilled to have such a full house this morning back here live at our Regional Issues Summit, and thank you to our sponsors. I'd like to ask my panelists to come forward, Jerry and Eric. We're going to get started today. I appreciate having you here. Again, I'm Jaime Henning, President and CEO of the Greeley Area Chamber of Commerce, proudly serving over 700 businesses in the Greeley area. Pleased to serve as the moderator for such an important topic, one that has been intertwined in Greeley's history and the region's for over 100 years. With our early advocacy on the Colorado Big Thompson project. I took some time actually when I took a water class recently to look through old chamber board minutes. And it was so interesting to hear the chamber board talk about having a vision and making sure they were looking forward. So it's great to be able to moderate this talk today about what we're seeing in water. Water is emerging as one of the most important and controversial subjects to be addressed in the 21st century. Water issues are particularly complex, and understanding the nuances is critical for good decision making. Colorado has been known for making sound water decisions, and those conversations are increasingly one of the things that keeps us as business owners up at night. Today we will discuss water's impact to the business community, the status and importance of water to our development and resilience in northern Colorado. I'd like to introduce our speakers today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on the mic and send it their way so they're ready when we ask them the questions. But I'm really thrilled to have both of these guests here today to talk a little more about water that are experts in their field. So we're going to cover a couple of questions. We have about 30 minutes this morning, and we're going to treat this more like a conversation. I'd ask them to prep me with a couple of questions that can give us a little deeper view of water in the area. So first I'd like to introduce Jerry. Jerry is on the left here. All right, I'll go ahead and steal this back for just a moment and we'll trade off. Let's do that. Sorry if you couldn't hear my early comments. I'd also like to take a moment here quickly before I introduce everyone today. My future board chair is in the room this morning. So Jason Jones, if you could please stand with Adams Bank and Trust. Just wanted to take a quick moment to recognize Jason. Thank you for being here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jerry first. Jerry is the Director of Operations for Northern Water, where he oversees operation and maintenance of Northern Water's supply, water delivery, and hydropower facilities, and is on the senior management team that works with the Board of Directors to set overall strategic direction for the organization. He has worked in water resources planning and operations in Colorado and the Western U.S. for over 30 years, so please help me welcome Jerry to our panel today. We also have with us Eric Dial, Deputy Director of Utility, Finance, and Customer Service for Greeley Water. In this role, he manages the financial operations, billing, customer service, and development review for Greeley Water. He's worked in Greeley for 12 years, and after a 10-year career prior in the city of Peoria, Arizona, where he worked in water resources and community development. Thank you for being here, Eric. I'll also mention several of our other partners, including Sean Chambers with the city, are having an important Colorado River meeting today. So water really impacts us all. And some of those conversations about scarcity and growth are really important to everyone in the room. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So I'm actually going to start with a question for Jerry. Jerry, what are the challenges facing Northern Colorado's water supply?
Well, thank you, Jaime, and thank you for having me here. It's great to see you all on this chilly morning. We'll try to get things warmed up in this room as we have conversations about water. But very good question, Jaime, and thank you. That came up at our table here during our breakfast discussion. And I'll use a term that my colleague and one of our board members at Northern Water uses, a term called aridification. As all of you know, we live in a semi-arid climate here in northern Colorado and in Colorado in general in the southwestern United States, and we continue to see aridification, or the drying of the southwestern U.S. And that's led to one of the biggest challenges, and Jaime mentioned it in the introduction, is the challenges that we face on the Colorado River. Northern Water is the local sponsoring entity for the Colorado Big Thompson Project, which is a U.S. Bureau of Reclamation project that brings supplemental water supplies from the Colorado River Basin to northeastern Colorado for use in municipal and agricultural areas. And we pay very close attention to what's going on in the Colorado River Basin, as does obviously the city of Greeley, one of our largest allottee in that project. So we're all very interested in what's going on in the Colorado River Basin. And frankly, the Colorado River Basin is in dire straits these days. You read a lot about that in the newspaper. Some of it's a little bit exaggerated, like stories in the newspaper tend to be, but a lot of it is right on point, that there's some very big challenges in the basin, and as Jaime mentioned, a lot of discussion going on these days about that. And then obviously the second thing that obviously came up again is population growth in northeastern Colorado. That continues to strain water supplies and change how we use water supplies in northeastern Colorado. I think we have plentiful water in northeastern Colorado, but what that does is when we see population growth like we have, starts to change how we manage that water and what the priorities and use of that water are. So those are things that we're working on. And finally, I'll mention wildfires. I know the city of Greeley has these same challenges. We had two very catastrophic wildfires in northeastern Colorado over the last few years, and we continue to spend a lot of time recovering from those wildfires. We've spent tens of millions of federal dollars, manage those dollars to recover from those wildfires, and those will continue to be challenges for us for the next many years in the water supply industry.
We'll shift over to Eric for our next question, and I'll actually hop into something that kind of correlates with that. Eric, can you share with us what are some of the future challenges you're facing at Greeley Water?
Sure, Jaime. Thanks for having me here. This different kind of group than I normally speak at, but it's also really critical that water and the economic development community and the legislative community are all on the same page. So some of the same themes that Jerry mentioned, unknown supplies, the impacts on our Colorado River supply, as well as climate change. You know, about 40% of Greeley's water supply comes from the Colorado Big Thompson system. We're actually in a pretty good place when it comes to you know, many of the water providers within northern Colorado, given that 40% of our supplies is from there. But we've made a lot of investments in other systems to you know, spread out our supply sources. So the unknown supply challenges is a big concern of ours. Wildfires, of course, you know, impacts our supplies. One of the other things that we have to really be concerned with is growth patterns and how that affects our water demand. We're not unique in that we've grown in northern Colorado, but what is surprising, at least it certainly is surprising when you look back at how much we've grown, is our water demand has remained relatively flat. And we're not the only ones who have been like that. And a lot of that has to do with the conservation efforts of the city, as well as just some of the regulatory changes for, faucets and shower heads and whatnot. So given that water utilities have to be forward-looking and we have to, plan many, many years out, that future demand is really a critical number that we have to figure out what we think is going to be. And so the challenges there are just relate to, what is our growth going to be? We have a pretty good sense there, but what does that equate to in a water demand standpoint? Some of the other things that we are aware of and are trying to manage relate to regional issues. Those of us who've been in the water world for a long time have had time to plan and acquire water supplies, but we have a lot of neighbors who just weren't around when many of those supplies were available. As was mentioned, Greeley is the biggest allottee of CBT, and that is a portion of our supply, but for many providers, that is the vast majority of their supply. And given that CBT has become very, very expensive and not very available, that's going to limit growth. So some of the challenges related to regionalism relate to that kind of have and have not perspective. It's tough when you're a new player in the water community, a relatively small town or water provider, and you just don't have the resources that a Greeley or Fort Collins or a Loveland have. And so it's hard to be on an equal playing field in that case. As well as financial limitations, and that's an obvious concern. But that also is probably the biggest opportunity, because the economies of scale in the water world make a lot of sense to partner up, and we just have to get past that challenge. And I don't pretend to have all the answers, but the nice thing about working in the water world is that these long-term problems give us the opportunity to figure out long-term solutions, and it takes some time to do that.
Great. Our next question will be for Jerry, actually. Since you referenced the Colorado River, I'm going to ask you a question about that, and knowing there's an important meeting happening today. So talk more about the Colorado River. What should northern Colorado water users be prepared for?
Yes, thank you, Jamie. And I think we could be here for the rest of the week and maybe even next week talking about all the challenges on the Colorado River Basin. So I'll try to boil the issue down to maybe something a little bit more understandable, and then kind of get to where does the rubber meet the road really for us all in northeastern Colorado, to take a step back and look at how we got to where we are in the Colorado River Basin. Those water supplies in the Colorado River are roughly split between the upper basin states. There's 4 upper basin states: Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico, and the lower basin states, 3 lower basin states: Nevada, California, and Arizona. With California and Arizona being the significant majority of the water use in the lower basin. And what's happened over time, even though there's a compact that splits that water evenly, the lower basin states have grown a lot quicker than the upper basin states, and they've grown into their allocation. And not only have they grown into their allocation, they've been using an excess of their allocation for about the last 20 to 30 years. The upper basin states, being a little bit more rural states, have not grown anywhere close to using their full allocation of water. As the water supplies have shrunk in the Colorado River Basin, again, getting back to that term of aridification, it's become much more evident and paramount that the overuse by the lower basin is problematic. And I'll say this here in this room because I think we have a full room of Coloradoans in the room. The problem really boils down to the overuse by the lower basin in the Colorado River, and that's what's got us to where we are. Now, it'd be nice to be able to say let's not allow the lower basin to overuse. It's not quite that simple in reality. For one, the lower basin is a very important and strong economic engine in the U.S. Once they grow into that supply, just like anybody in northeastern Colorado, once you start supplying water to houses and start supplying water to industries, you can't just take that water back. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that politically, it doesn't work like that in reality. And so even though it's our position here in Colorado that a lot of the problem is due to the lower basin, it's going to take the basin as a whole to get ourselves out of this problem. And so the state of Colorado, Department of Natural Resources in particular, Becky Mitchell, who is the director of the Colorado Water Conservation Board, is our lead negotiator. In the state of Colorado, we consult regularly with Becky Mitchell. She fairly represents all the uses here in Colorado and represents us as a whole. But the one thing that Northern Water did very recently, I think the letter was dated in October, was committed to continuing to support the state of Colorado in those negotiations, and maybe more importantly, and where the rubber meets the road for us here in northeastern Colorado, we committed to a reduction of 30% in non-functional turf. You've probably heard this a little bit before, but our indoor uses and uses by industry are largely non-consumptive uses. In other words, the water is used. If you think of yourself, when you take a shower in the morning, that water goes down the drain, it goes to a wastewater plant, and then goes back to the system and can be reused by another source. Unfortunately, when you water your lawn at home, although we all like our green lawns, I have a green lawn like probably most of us here in this room, that water is consumptively used. We never see that back in the system, and that water is gone from the system. And so when we talk about water conservation, and that's really what we're probably talking about here, is increased levels of water conservation in northeastern Colorado. It really comes down to really get a bang for our buck, we have to do something about the turf, the use of water for turf growth in northeastern Colorado. And so we've started to get the message out that we need to think about development maybe a little bit differently in northeastern Colorado in the future than the way it has in the past. And I think was sitting with the folks I had with McInerney here at the table during breakfast. We're already seeing that in a lot of our developments. We're seeing less open space with 100% turf like we historically have done. We're seeing a lot more native turf that has a lot less water use. And those kinds of developments. So I really think when we talk about where does the rubber meet the road for what we're looking at in northeastern Colorado, that's probably where it hits the road. Now, will there be other reductions? It's very possible. Our board that allocates water out of our project is starting to think about that. They've started to think about that when they set our quota out of our system in November last month. Set it a little bit lower than they typically have, knowing that we've got these challenges out there. But we'll continue to negotiate over the next few months and see where we end up. But I think it is going to change how future development in northeastern Colorado looks from that perspective.
We'll kind of build on that development question, and I'll turn that over to you, Eric. I know development fees are of concern to lots in the room. How are you managing that and ensuring that work around new growth and keeping that fair and balanced?
Yeah, this issue is near and dear to my heart. I came from a community development standpoint when I worked in Arizona, and I've also worked in the water resources world. So that nexus is obviously really critical, and we all recognize it. So when in my time here at Greeley, I've done a number of different programs, a progressive effort to make the water development nexus more precise. And so everyone in the development world agrees that development should pay for the impacts that they impose upon a city, whether that be water, sewer, transportation, parks, or whatnot. The devil, of course, is in the details on that, because you're going to get several different perspectives depending on where you're at within that world. And so given that water development fees are one of the largest components of the development fee bucket, it becomes really critical to do work to make this this impact fair. And so a water development fee, whether that be for the infrastructure or the raw water costs, can cost anywhere from $30,000 to $80,000 of a cost of a house, depending on which water utility you're in and how large that house and that lot is. So it's really critical to do the good work to make sure that you're charging a fair price and collecting the right amount of raw water for that development. So some of the things that Greeley has done, and before I get into that, let me kind of explain a water provider's perspective on this. we're going to be naturally conservative when we calculate how water should be collected from a development. And it makes sense when you think about it, because we have to provide service 24/7, 365, and under variable conditions, whether it be drought or flood. And so people expect that tap to produce water when they turn the knob. And so that conservative mentality has historically meant that we have been collecting what some in the development community would say over-collecting for raw water. And that's basically the water that we have to take to our treatment plant to provide service. Greeley recognized that, and we addressed it through a series of measures. And these measures kind of took a few different perspectives, or looked at it a few different ways. And one of the first things we did was look at the volume of raw water that we collected. And so, the amount that we were collecting over the past many years, when we had usage that was much less, was much more robust, when the turf that Jerry referred to was every house had a big yard, we collected more. And as development has changed, as homes have gotten smaller, as lots have gotten smaller, as our commercial and industrial customers have gotten more aware of their water use, the demands have changed. So we recognize that, and we changed the amount of raw water we collected through things like reducing the amount of areas that we collected for. We used to do it on the gross acreage, and now we only do it on the areas that are, actually have homes or turf. In the multifamily and commercial realm, we changed from a tap-based collection, and this is a pretty common solution for most water providers, where they collect the amount of raw water based on the tap size. And there's a little bit of a nexus there, but the reality is an office building with a 1-inch tap is going to look a lot different in water use than a restaurant will with a 1-inch tap. So we changed it to type of use. And in many cases, this actually reduced the amount of raw water that was being collected. So it brought the cost of development down for those types of developments. And then one of the last things we did is we changed the way we collected, or changed the way we calculated the cash in lieu of raw water costs. So, and this is essentially a way for developers to pay cash rather than bring a wet water supply to a city. And so historically, we've had that cost pegged to the price of the Colorado Big Thompson source. And this is a widely used method across northern Colorado. It was a very transparent water supply as far as costs go, and many water providers have used the CBT system as their pricing peg their cash in lieu to the CBT system. However, as that system has become very utilized and gotten very expensive, it didn't make sense to use that anymore. So what we did is we changed it to the value of our water portfolio. As I mentioned previously, we have a lot of different types of water supplies. So we pegged it to the price of our portfolio as well as the cost it takes for us to actually store that water so that we can use it when the demands are occurring. And this brought the cash in lieu price down significantly. So Greeley is we've utilized the portfolio that we've historically collected over the years, and we've provided that benefit to our development community. And Greeley, because of our relatively inexpensive water and a lot of available land, we are ready for growth.
Excellent. I'll ask Jerry this question, but feel free to rally up with an answer as well, Eric. I'm going to ask a loaded question. Is Northern Colorado running out of water? Knowing you're speaking to a business audience who has needs, but also kind of that residential balance. So I'll ask you that question.
Well, I'll get started out and maybe talk about the water supply piece of things, although we've talked about some doom and gloom in the Colorado River Basin. My short answer there is no, we're not running out of water supply in northeastern Colorado. We have those water supplies now. Do they need to be developed further? Yes, and I'll mention just a couple of things. First, our board spends a lot of time talking about base water supply protection. We're starting to see a lot of threats from the Denver metro area coming up and purchasing what we call base water supply in northeastern Colorado to take those to the metro area. Of course, when that water supply leaves northeastern Colorado. It's no longer available. And that becomes challenging for us when we're trying to develop new water supplies, to see our existing water supplies go outside our district boundaries. And so our board spends a lot of time thinking about that and talking about that, and we're very interested from Northern Water's perspective in keeping northeastern Colorado's water in northeastern Colorado for our use. The other thing I'll mention is 2 new projects that Northern Water is developing to increase our water supply. The first, and you've probably heard of both of these projects, the first is our Chimney Hollow project, a new dam and reservoir located west of Carter Lake. We're actually under construction on that project. It'll be another reservoir about the size of Carter Lake to store water for municipal uses for Windy Gap participants, Greeley being one of those participants in that project. It's been under construction for about a year. We have about 3 more years left. We hope to begin filling that reservoir in 2025. And if any of you, it's magnificent. It's an awesome construction site from an engineer's perspective. If any of you would like to go on a tour of that, let me know or get on our website. We'll ramp our tours back up in the spring, probably in March or April. And it's just a great site to get out and see. And then the other project I'll mention is our Northern Integrated Supply Project. And I think you may be the first group to hear this, but we were granted our major federal permit last Friday. We're very excited to get that record of decision from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on our 1041 permit. Now, does that mean we'll go out and start turning dirt on January 1st? Probably not. We still have some design work, and frankly, there has been a lot of rhetoric from environmental groups on suing the Corps of Engineers over that permit, and we don't have our heads in the sand. We fully expect those environmental groups to follow through on filing those suits, so we may be in court for a couple of years, but that does actually match our design timeline, and we're really hoping to be under construction on the Northern Integrated Supply Project, hopefully by 2025, if all things go well, with completion and starting to fill reservoirs in 2032. So we've got a lot of motion. I know City of Greeley's got a lot in motion too, so I'll turn it over to Eric to answer that question.
Yeah, that's great. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think we're running out of water in northern Colorado, but there might be a little bit of a mismatch on where that water is and how it needs to be used. I spoke a little bit about some of the legacy water providers in the region, and we're all in pretty good shape. The new projects that Jerry just mentioned, Chimney Hollow, we're super excited about that. That's going to allow us to rely on the Windy Gap water supply, which we've used for many years, but because of restrictions of space in the CBT system, we couldn't rely on it. We couldn't count on it being a firm supply for us. This project's going to change that for us. Those who are a part of the NISP project, they made a big stride forward. That's fantastic for the region. But we do have some of those fast growth areas that are somewhat water limited, and there's always a solution there. It costs a lot of money, and you have to make those investments well ahead of time. And some of the struggles that you've heard from some of the smaller water providers in the region relate to that. And I'm very sympathetic, because if you're in a high growth area, you need that revenue to provide for the planning for that growth, and there's only a limit to that. There's a limit to how far in advance you can plan when you're a small community. Greeley, given that we have that agricultural DNA in us, water's always been a part of our long-term planning process, so we were always planning well ahead, buying up water rights, and then what we would essentially do is buy up agricultural water rights and then lease that water back to the farmer so that farmland would stay in production, which benefits them. It benefits us because so many of our businesses in Greeley are ag adjacent. So that was a part of the process for us. So, long answer, no, we're not running out of water. However, there might be some areas where we need to reallocate that water, and that happens through transfers, through payments. It just costs a lot of money to do so. So that's kind of where I see it.
We talked a lot today about just the nexus between growth and water, and we proudly tout being one of the fastest growing areas in northern Colorado. So maybe as a final question, I actually have two more questions. Tell me a little bit what your organization specifically, we'll give you a moment just to talk about how is your organization specifically contributing to solutions around some of these issues we see today. And you've talked a little bit about that, but if you can expand on that.
Yeah, I'll start this time. It really is about looking ahead, and so much in the water world, it just costs so much money, and the limitations of supply just means that you have to be very strategic about how you plan for the future. And so what Greeley has done is we've master planned out our expected demand, and as I mentioned before, that's very uncertain, but you have to build your capital plan to address that need, and that means looking out 20, 30, 60 years in advance to what that demand might look like. And so we work closely with our community development group. Our build out in Greeley is expected to be somewhere north of 400,000 people. But we don't know what that water demand is going to exactly equate to. So we have a number of different scenarios that we're planning for, and so we have to build the infrastructure for that. And some of the things we've done is not only buying water supplies, but we have invested very heavily in conservation to make sure we're using our supplies as efficiently as possible. And then we have been working on water storage projects, and the biggest accomplishment we recently made was the purchase of the Terry Ranch Aquifer Supply and Storage and Recovery Project. And so that's going to be our reservoir to store some of our water that we have acquired through the years. So that was a huge investment, a big win for us, and it's going to set us up for success for many years ahead.
Thank you, Eric. I'll just add that, we've talked about a couple of the projects that are either under construction or close to construction, but our board and our organization always takes a regional perspective. Of course, our district boundaries not only include the immediate Front Range here out to Greeley, but also along the South Platte all the way to Nebraska, and we have both folks that are heavily involved in irrigation and agriculture, as well as the municipal folks. And our board is always looking at what's the next solution out there and anticipating what the next problem is, so we can drive that next solution. And so we've been spending a lot of time recently looking at what is that next project out there. There's some challenges in the lower part of our district. In particular, the lower part of our district depends on return flows from this area, depends on water that's either unused or comes out of wastewater plants and then gets reused in the lower part of the district. And they have not historically had a lot of storage reservoirs in the lower part of our district. There's a couple of large reservoirs for particular irrigation districts, but nothing on a regional perspective. And our board really drives us as staff to look at what are regional solutions out there to keep the entire economy of the district whole. And so we've been spending more and more time looking at, in particular, the lower part of our district from Kersey on out east to see what is that next project out there that can help our irrigation and agricultural interests continue to be an important part of the economy here in northeastern Colorado.
Final question for you. I know a lot of us in the room want to learn more about water, and a quick shout out to our media partners. Thank you for keeping us up to speed on the latest developments. But also, are there other places that we can subscribe to more news and just learn more about this? I know you're steeped in this every day, but for business owners in the room and people who want to learn the latest, what are some places we can go or things we can subscribe to?
I'll just mention a couple things. Of course, we at Northern Water do have a newsletter and a website, as well as social media on the normal social media platforms. And I'd invite you to get on Northern Water's website and create an account. You'll get those emails that provide a monthly update on just general things going on at Northern Water, as well as our two large projects. And I'll also mention an organization called Water Education Colorado. We shorten that to WECO. And I don't have their website address in front of me, but I think if you Google Water Education Colorado, they've got a lot of educational materials. I think both of our organizations help fund that organization. A lot of what we call citizens guides that really try to boil these complex water issues down to something that the non-water professional can understand and put that in understandable terms. They also have a newsletter, I think, that maybe even comes out weekly, or an email blast that comes out weekly that provides kind of the news of the day when it comes to water. And they try to, it's a nonpartisan organization, try to represent both sides of the coin and all the issues that go into developing water. So those are the two that I would recommend.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add to that other than I think it's really important to pay attention to the cities and water providers that you all work with when they talk about water issues. Because where the rubber hits the road is when a city council adopts the development fees related to water, or a new ordinance related to the type of water that must be used. Like, for example, Greeley is now requiring non-potable water use for new development of a certain type. That's when it becomes real. And so I would really encourage you to just pay attention to water issues when you see them come up on a council agenda or in your water district's board meeting, because it's becoming more and more impactful. And it's something that's we're just going to have to pay attention to going forward.
Great. I want to give a big round of applause for our panelists this morning. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Jerry. I also want to thank everyone in the room. This is a really important and complex issue, so we need everyone. We need collaboration among regional partners. So thank you for listening into this morning.